Hi folks, in this video I'll demonstrate how to get started with JavaScript. So on our class website, JavaScript is located under the front end menu. So the intent of JavaScript is to add behavior to our web page. So HTML is content, CSS is styling, and JavaScript is behavior. When things change on the page based on what the user does, hovering, clicking, typing in forms, so that sort of thing. So let's add some JavaScript to our page. And again, there's similar to CSS, you can add JavaScript code either internal or externally. There is no inline equivalent for JavaScript. So again, external is the recommended approach. But to start out with, we'll do the internal method, and you can add it either in the head or the body. So let's see how that will work. And all we need is just a script tag. And the equivalent of printf in JavaScript is console.log. So now if we were to go to our page and refresh it, you should be able to see it in the console here. Again, to get to developer tools, you can just do that. So now let's try the same thing, but in our body tag. Just to show that something did change. Okay, we refresh. So I make this a little bigger. And lastly, as mentioned here, when the page loads, it loads from top to bottom. So because sometimes JavaScript can take a long time to load, depending on how your page is set up, it is safer to put it at the end of the body so that your page loads quickly, so the user can kind of start reading it and using it a little bit while the actual JavaScript is loaded in the background. It's hard to demonstrate this, but as your site gets bigger, you can experience a noticeable difference. So let's just show that it's the same. Okay. All right, so that's how you include JavaScript internally. So to do the same thing externally, we'll just create a JavaScript file, and in here we'll do the same thing. And we'll include it pretty much the same way as internally, and similar to how CSS did it. So we just gotta make sure we have the right file name. Again, you can have them in folders and just make sure you have the right path to it. So here, both messages are displayed in order matters. Here, the hello.js command is executed first. Okay, so That is how we include JavaScript. Now, let's go through some basics of JavaScript. You can define just variables. So we refresh, see our string. Let is kind of a way to declare available, and then we're initializing it right away. You can also have numbers. So here you see our 3.3. That is similar to var, but var is global and let is scoped. So let is a little bit more of a best practice. And there's comments as well. So again, we don't want to include the global namespace. Your variables in one file might conflict with a variable in another file if they're global and they're sharing the same name. Okay, so some basic data structures that JavaScript affords you is an array. And you can mix things as well. So let's print that out. Here you can see the first element. These arrays are zero indexed, and you can mix types. So the next one would be their object. And with this, you use the curly braces instead of the square braces, and it takes the key value. So let's lock that out. It's also good to put semicolons. There's something I have to remind myself, because I'm too used to languages that doesn't need it. So here you have a key and a value. You can use variables for these things. So we were to use a string variable, or use a string variable as the key. You can see Oh, this is actually called the string variable. It doesn't get interpolated. That's interesting. Unexpected. What if I did something wrong? Okay, so there is a way, a little bit more involved. I'm just gonna try this and see if this works. There you go. Here's our hello variable. Okay, again, so the last item you don't need a comma, but I tend to just like it because this is easier to show in the array. It still works, but if I wanted to just add a fourth one and I forget, then it'll error out. So I guess, but if this was here and I add a fourth one, I'm safe. So I always try to just have it to make things a little easier to append to, rather than remembering to make sure you fix the previous line to add a comma. Let's just add a new line and I don't have to think about it that much. All right, so those are the basic variables. Now I'm gonna go through the branching. Let's see. So here it talks about const is similar to that, but the constant variable doesn't change. Or the variable is meant to be constant. Here is our basic if-else statement. So we'll check if our variable is greater than 3. So if it is, we should see our statement there. And of course you have your else if and then the else block. Okay. So that's what that would look like. And if we change our number to 2, we should see the lesser statement. Okay. The last thing about the if-else statements is in JavaScript, there's a 3 equal sign comparator, and this is most likely what you want to use for your comparisons is most equivalent to what the other languages have for a 2 equal sign version. And you can read about best practices and mistakes. It'll talk about some things that are unique to JavaScript. So here in your other languages, you would think these would be false, but in JavaScript it is true because it does type conversions for you with just the 2 equal sign. So the 3 equal sign is closer to what you'll probably expect based on previous experience in other languages. So if we were to change this to that. So reading through the best practices and common mistakes would give you a heads up on some bugs that it's just not intuitive. So here, we should put the right number, and again use the triple equal sign to be safer. Let's try that. So that's false either way. Whereas this one is true because one's a string and the other one's a number. So just keep that in mind. Let's see. Let's do some looping next. So this for in loop, you can loop over an object. And then this you can loop over arrays, the for. I like the syntax a little bit better. Would tend to use it a little bit more. Initializing a dummy variable and incrementing it is something that's common in other languages, but might not be necessary in this language, in JavaScript. So let's loop over our object. So for basic key, key in object variable, we'll just log the key. And we can also log the value as well. Here, that's the first key here with the value here. And then we have key 2 and the hello from the string variable, and then with the using hello from the string variable as the key, it has a value of 2. Oh, I forgot to mention that you can also mix type. So you can have an array here. Just do not confuse with the other letter word 2. So we come back here. So here's, oh, not the array, but the key. Here you see our arrow array key. You can also have an array, so you can mix types. And you can also have nested objects. So we refresh now and look at our object, or we can see the object key has the nested inner key and inner values. Do the same thing here. You can do the same thing with our array, but with the array you don't need a key. We'll just denote this as that. Again, we don't need a key in our array. All right. Just to distinguish the two. And do the same thing here. Oops. Oh, this is the array version. All right, so here, the array, we have a nested list and an object that's nested in the array. And in the object, we also have our nested array and object. So looping through the object, you can see that. We can see that the array and object is showing up. Now let's do the same thing. Loop over our array. Since the array came first, we'll do it here. We're looping over our array variable. Array item is the name we'll use within our loop. And we'll just log that. To keep it, maybe to distinguish between the two, we should add in looping through array, looping through object. Okay, refresh. Here we'll see that we're starting to loop through our, let's do the array first. Loop through our array. Here's the nested array and the nested object. And now we're looping through the object. And we have the nested array and the nested object as well. Okay, so those are the most useful loops. If you really need to loop until a condition is met, so maybe you're waiting for something to happen, or yeah, so that's when, if you're not looping through an array or a list, that's useful. And then if you're doing it for a set number of times, this loop is useful. But I find that most of the time I'm either looping through an array or an object and doing something with its elements. So that's a little nicer syntax. Okay, let's go through functions. Okay, this is getting a bit long. Let's just create a new file. Name it a function. And in the main file, we'll include it, and we'll comment out this portion. And I can also do this. I should have done this earlier, I guess. So let's define our function. Here we go. So let's do this. Our function. This is really multiplying. So that's the name of the function. And then here we're defining it, and we can actually use it. Of course, this is a silly function. And we'll log this out. Oops. Yeah, so 2 times 3 equals 6. Again, it's silly because you can do arithmetic using the normal conventional basically what you're doing here. So not that useful, but it's there. And you can also save the return value as a variable. Log that out. Okay. So JavaScript's kind of forgiving. I didn't declare it, but let's see. I think it automatically makes a global variable for you. So I think global, I'm not sure, but good practice. Always define or declare your variables, and it's always good to declare your variables at the top. And then you can actually assign it later. That way, everything is declared up front and in one place, and you're not looking through the code to figure out where the variable was declared. So that's function. The next pawn is probably a class. Okay. Again, let's make a new file. And then to use it, well, car1, close, new car, car1. And then we'll log this out. And then don't forget to include it in our actual page. Okay, so we did it now. We have a car with a name and the year that it was built. And classes, like functions, are a great way to reuse code. So, if we decided to reuse this function and give it different parameters, our results will be different. So, and we don't have to like redefine the code that's in here. Of course, in this example, it's silly. You can just use the asterisk, and that's, yeah. But that's just an example. And in this case, we can reuse it by having two cars. And that just helps you reuse code instead of copy and pasting. So that is classes. And maybe the last thing in this basic, before we jump into using jQuery and Bootstrap, is show you that you can call our function and class from another file. From a different file, but of course we need to include it, and we also need to include the function. But let's see if it'll error out. So multiply is not defined, so be sure to bring it in. And here you see our convertible 3, and where's our main? Let's change this to 10. Okay. Of course, order matters. If you use it before it's defined, you'll get an error. So this is pretty cool. Yeah. Actually, no. Yeah. So always define it before you use it. And that's it for the simple custom JavaScript. Let's move on to adding libraries. And the two that we'll be using is Jquery and Bootstrap. Again, it's the way the application we're building now is kind of antiquated. The newer generations of websites with the front end frameworks, you'll be kind of including libraries a little bit differently with a package manager, npm, and building, packaging things. So the way we're doing it is one way, but just so you know, there's other ways out there. Okay, so don't need this anymore. So let's start with Jquery. So Jquery is a utility that basically allows you to select an element and then do something to it. So select, find something, do something to it. Find something, and then do something to it. Okay, so let's do that. So npm, you can install it and then package it. You can also use Bower. But for us, we're gonna just use the CDN, Content Distribution Network. But yeah. So we can use jQuery CDN. And there's different versions depending if you want to optimize on space, and but for us, since we're just learning it, we'll just use the kind of like the development version. And you'll notice there's other CDNs, and you'll see this with Bootstrap. Bootstrap doesn't have their own CDN and use one of these. And at the end of the day, it's just a link to somewhere where these their JavaScript files are located. So very similar to how we are here, but instead of the file being local to the site, it's an external. So here, the location, integrity, make sure the file that you're expecting is the one that the site receives. There's no man in the middle or some sort of hacking going on. So this, yeah, it's a hash of the JavaScript files that you're intending to bring in. So now, if we were to say, load this, and we don't have a continued class, but we do have a button. Okay. Jquery. Oh. We have to make sure we load our main file after jQuery is loaded. And jQuery also provides a function to load when the file is actually ready, or when the library is actually ready. So here it changed our button text from click me to next step. So it's working. There's a safer way. So Jquery Ready. So these are ways to kind of check it. The $ is an alias. It's jQuery is so common, they just kind of hijack $ and yeah, so it's an alias to the library. So I think these are the recommended ways of waiting until your document is ready and then executing your script. So let's just use this. To make sure our document is ready before we change the button text. Okay. So now this is done when each and every time the page is loaded. But that's not what we really want to do. Let's do something based on an user's action. So let's do something where when it's clicked, we'll do something. click the changed at the start of, we'll just say initialize. Okay, here we go. We just want a button whenever a button is clicked. Whenever it's clicked, so this is an event. You can read through jQuery's documentation on events. Not that one. I think those are like community events. So here's the different events that jQuery can help you listen to, and then with certain actions you can then take with jQuery, and of course selectors, how to select the element you want to base your action off of, and then of course you can walk the DOM, the graph of all the HTML elements, because you can the browser translate your HTML into a graph, and that's called the DOM. So traversing the DOM, if you can't get to it with your selector, or like with your CSS type selectors. Okay, so on a click, what we're going to try to do is have it make this paragraph disappear. So do that. We're going to use actually, let's just do this. We'll add a class and take away a class. That's a very common pattern. So let's go through that. Okay. So first we have to find our paragraph, and then we will add and remove a class name warning. So here, reloading, changed our button text, and this is the paragraph that we're gonna modify. So here is adding the class when we click it and taking it off, toggling between. But the user doesn't see anything unless we actually create a style related to that. So very quickly, I'll just add a style here, anything with a class name of warn. Just to call it warning. We'll say change the color to red. Reload. When the warning class is there, it'll be red. So that is a very basic user interaction. And so I think with this pattern, you can use about 80% of jQuery. Okay, so that's jQuery. Let's now move on to Bootstrap. And I guess one more thing, I don't know how to get to it, but there's a ton of things you can do. So this is under the, where's this under? I don't know what section is under. Oh, effects basics. There we go, effects basics. And you can do this toggle. And now that'll actually make it appear and disappear. Over to reload. Okay, and I think you can actually give it options. So there's more of a fading. Here's slow. Let's just try that. But yeah. So there's a lot you can do with just jQuery alone. All right, let's move on to Bootstrap. With Bootstrap, it'll allow you to do even more. So again, this is the newer way of kind of like building applications. We'll stick with this. So you can load just the style or the actual JavaScript. So we're going to do both to include so this is style. We probably want it loaded in the head. And then the JavaScript will load in the body. So here's the using JS deliver. Okay. So you notice JavaScript already kind of styled, Bootstrap already styled our buttons and paragraphs slightly differently. So let's do something simple. One of the main benefits of Bootstrap is it allows you to kind of lay out your app without you having to mess with the CSS to do that, and that's a huge win. And you can read through the documentation on how to implement that. So just to quickly show Bootstrap working, we can use, again, some text styling. Maybe not that one. There you go. This is simple. So we just add this class. We should go to get let's go to see Bootstrap in action. So here it's styled it. So I can't remember if Bootstrap brings in jQuery for you or it still needs it. guess we need to use something that's more JavaScript-y within Bootstrap. That's a little bit involved. Yeah, maybe I'll just leave that. That might be the simplest here. All right, let's try this. Let's hit this, maybe better. All right, so we'll give this a shot. Okay, so the buttons are conflicting here, but we have the idea that it's working. And if we were to get rid of jQuery, let's see if it still works. Yeah, definitely. Okay, so yeah, you don't. I think Bootstrap's bringing jQuery as their own dependency. I think before they had to, we had to manually bring it in, but I think now it's not an issue. Okay. All right. I'm gonna leave this out, and I'll just put our code back in, and that should do it. Okay, so that's a quick, light introduction into JavaScript and using jQuery and Bootstrap. There's a ton more you can do with jQuery and Bootstrap, but again, you can learn it as you go. This is hopefully just lays a foundation, and as you find that you need certain features, see if jQuery and Bootstrap is able to provide it for you. and just read through it and learn that as you need each piece from their library. All right, with that, good luck and have fun.